Time is an interesting concept. It's been kind to some things, and not so kind to others. Video games, of course, are no exception here. Father Time has certainly treated some titles better than others. This is due to a variety of factors, and is usually a combination of things like the graphics, long loading times, and archaic game design. Let's just say that some mechanics have been left in the past for good reason. But on that same note, this is not the case for every game, as some of them have aged quite gracefully, JRPGs included. This video aims to shine some light on some of those JRPGs that, in my opinion, have stood the test of time. And for each entry on the list, I will be giving specific reasons for why I feel that way. So, without further ado, here's a list of 8 great JRPGs that have aged really well. To start this list off, we have Breath of Fire 4. Developed by Capcom and released for the PlayStation, Breath of Fire 4 is a stunning example of just how gorgeous 2D sprites can still look to this day. Capcom was an absolute powerhouse in the 90s and early 2000s, with years of them perfecting their craft on the 2D sprites, and this was them at their peak. The character models, their animations, and the enemy sprites all look excellent. Combine this with amazing music and a more mature story that features darker and heavier themes, and you have a title that's aged quite well. It should be noted, however, that there still are random encounters, which I know aren't everyone's favorite, but the loading times and the pace of the battles are much quicker than the third game at least. All in all, Breath of Fire 4 was a great game back then, and it's still a great game now. It's tied as my favorite in the Breath of Fire series for a good reason, and well worth playing today. We did put out a retrospective over the third game last year, so who knows? Maybe you guys can expect one for the fourth game sometime within the next few months as well. Guess we'll just have to see. Coming up next, we have the absolute classic that is Chrono Trigger. Pretty much the poster child for JRPGs that have aged well. I'm sure most of you were expecting this one at some point. Developed by a Prime Squaresoft and released for the Super Nintendo, Chrono Trigger is considered by many to be, perhaps, the best JRPG of all time. A large part of this is due to its legacy and just how well it's aged. I mean, come on. The game was created by what would later be dubbed as the Dream Team, featuring the creator of the Final Fantasy series, Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of the Dragon Quest series, Yuji Horii, and the character designer of Dragon Quest / creator of the legendary Dragon Ball series, Akira Toriyama. With a team like this, how could they not make something magically timeless? The colorful cast of characters are also charming and memorable. The unique, time-traveling story is paced extremely well and is a prime example of quality over quantity, and the absolutely beautiful OST, composed by the then fresh-faced Yasunori Mitsuda, would only just be the start of his legendary career. Being the first time in charge of a project, Mitsuda was so desperate to prove himself that he actually worked himself to the point of hospitalization and needed some help from Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu to finish the remaining tracks for him. Now, if that doesn't say passion, I don't know what the hell does. Another big reason why Chrono Trigger has aged so well is that there are no random encounters. Outside of some scripted battles, for the most part, you can visibly see every enemy on screen and have the choice to either fight them or not. Plus, battles took place right then and there and didn't transition to another screen like most other JRPGs did at the time, simultaneously creating a feeling of immersion and making the pace feel much quicker in the process. For being a retro RPG at the core, Chrono Trigger almost doesn't feel like one, as it was really ahead of its time, no pun intended. Even though I grew up with the Super Nintendo, I didn't really get into RPGs until the PlayStation era, and therefore didn't play this one until a lot later on. I was more into modern RPGs at the time, and found it quite difficult to get into the older Final Fantasy games, which made it even more surprising that for being an old school game, Chrono Trigger still managed to absolutely hook me in. There's definitely something to be said about its ability to draw in a player that previously found it hard to get into older RPGs. Alright, I've rambled about this one long enough now, and I've probably made it pretty obvious that it's one of my favorites. So, if you're one of the few RPG fans out there that have still yet to play this one, what are you waiting for? The next game we have on our list is Grandia II. Grandia II was developed by Game Arts and was originally released for the Dreamcast. It was later ported to the PS2 and even got a remaster for the Nintendo Switch in 2019. I think this game has aged well for a variety of reasons. The graphics are charming enough, the voice acting wasn't bad for the time, there are no random encounters with enemies being visible on screen, and the story, in my opinion, was overall quite captivating. With that said, by far the biggest reason why it's aged so well, though, is the incredibly spectacular battle system. Man, are battles fun as shit in this game. It's a really unique, turn-based system that sort of plays out in real time, allowing you the opportunity to potentially cancel the enemy's attacks and stuff like that. It's so much fun. I think the first Grandia game has also aged really well, but the battle mechanics in Grandia 2 are just a little smoother overall, and they also streamlined the magic and skill system, which made it a little better in my opinion. Plus, I feel like I've talked about the original Grandia more recently, and wanted to give the second game some love. It's an excellent JRPG that holds up really well to this day, and perhaps one of the best from that generation. Ryudo is also a really compelling, badass protagonist who nearly makes the game worth playing alone. If this is one that's escaped your radar so far, then put it on the to-do list. Coming up next, we have Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Another Squaresoft title developed in their golden years, Super Mario RPG is actually the game that got me into RPGs in the first place. I know just earlier in the video I said I didn't get into RPGs until the PS1 era, but Super Mario RPG was the one exception. There's just so much to love here, and a lot of it has aged so well. The game is visually stunning for a Super Nintendo title with such vibrance and colorful environments. The music is incredibly catchy and well composed. The writing and all of the characters are also charming and endearing. And most importantly, gameplay is just really fun. In between battles, there's a lot of platforming to keep things fresh, and battles themselves feature an element of timed button pressing mechanics to add more player engagement. The pacing of the game is also handled extremely well and can be beaten in about 20 hours, making this one a really fun, lighthearted romp to go back to and replay every now and then. It's just as engaging now as it was back then, and is well worth playing today. The next game we have on our list is Suikoden II. Suikoden II was developed by Konami and was released for the PlayStation. To me, Suikoden II has aged well for three major reasons. 1. The story is a timeless tale about the tragedies of war and its effect on a group of childhood friends with really strong and emotional writing. 2. Said characters and their situations are handled very well and leave a lasting impression on you. And 3. Battles and loading times are so quick and fast-paced. Like seriously, I played this game pretty recently along with Legend of Dragoon and Breath of Fire 3, and for a PlayStation game, it was night and day how much faster battles moved overall. Also, when you encounter a group of trash enemies that you're way over-leveled for, the game gives you the option to let go instead of run, allowing you to escape with 100% certainty. Not only that, but with as huge of a cast of playable characters as this game has, if any of them are ever super behind on levels and you need to catch them up, you can do so incredibly quickly with the way experience works in this game. Each character just needs 1,000 experience points to level up, and the more underleveled they are against an enemy, the more points they'll gain in comparison. Even if a character is like 20 levels behind another one, just fight in 5 to 10 battles or so, and they'll pretty much be caught up. It's a great system, and the developers should really be given praise for how much they respect your time. It makes it hold up extraordinarily well, and is a blast to go back and replay. The first Suikoden game also holds up pretty well with its fast-paced battle system, but the second one streamlined a lot of gameplay mechanics, making it a bit more smoother and player-friendly experience overall. This is a series that we've yet to cover in more detail, so be on the lookout for a retrospective over one of these games sometime later this year. Coming up next, we have Ogre Battle 64, Pierson of Lordly Caliber. Ogre Battle 64 came out for the Nintendo 64 and was developed by Quest Corporation. It's like a real-time strategy RPG with incredibly unique gameplay. And that's honestly the main reason why I decided to include it on this list. If I want to play a game with this type of gameplay, this is still the best iteration of it to this date. There's no other game like it out there. Well, outside of the previous Super Nintendo title, but this one is pretty much just a bigger and better version of that. It's actually a shame that we've yet to get a modern game with this type of gameplay, but oh well. Anyway, it's pretty hard to describe the complex gameplay here in such a short segment, but I'll do my best. You customize units and fill them up with different class types, and send them out in real time to attack other enemy units and take over strongholds. Of course, it's much more complex than that, but that's just a really brief summary. Once you learn all the ins and outs, it's a really addicting system. The more mature story about the morality of war is also really interesting, with very strong writing. The game offers branching storyline paths with different characters available on each route, giving you the choice to decide what's right or not. This replayability, along with the heavy themes and addicting gameplay, have allowed Ogre Battle 64 to age quite well in my opinion. It may not be the easiest to get a hold of these days, but if you are able to, I highly recommend it. The next game we have up is Final Fantasy X. Final Fantasy X was developed by Squaresoft, obviously, and came out for the PS2. Some other Final Fantasy games could probably fit here as well, but they all have one issue or another that holds them back from aging quite as well as Final Fantasy X in my opinion. The character models in FF7 look like shit. The gameplay in FF8, while fun enough in its own right, is completely broken, and the battles in FF9 move so slow. I guess you do have the option to fast forward in the recent port, so I'm more talking about the base versions here. And at that, Final Fantasy X holds up really well. For gamers looking to get into a Final Fantasy game for the first time, this is always one of the first ones I recommend. Even now, and especially back then, it's a really cinematic game in nature and therefore feels quite familiar with modern gaming. For someone that doesn't have a past with retro gaming, it's definitely an easier transition than some of the older 16-bit titles. For the time of its release, the voice acting was also pretty good I think, and still holds up well enough. Like most Final Fantasy titles, the music is timeless and the characters are also memorable. The journey to defeat Sin, along with all the themes it covers along the way, makes for one of my favorite stories in the series. But perhaps the thing that holds up best about this game, however, is the battle system. Battles may be random, but they move extremely quick with fluid animations. The random encounters never really bothered me in this game as the battles were just so fast-paced. The battle system itself is also loads of fun and my favorite iteration in the entire series. I absolutely love how you can actually see the character turn order, which actually allows for you to plan for and implement strategy. Who knew such a simple concept could allow for so much more tactics and options? In addition to this, you can swap your characters in and out right then and there in battle, which was a first for the series. All in all, Final Fantasy X is an excellent title, and quite possibly the game that's aged the best out of the whole Final Fantasy franchise, in my humble opinion at least. Alright, to finish off this list, we have Shining Force 2. Shining Force 2 was developed by Camelot and was initially released for the Sega Genesis. It was later added to the Genesis Collection, which has pretty much been ported to every console ever. Shining Force 2 is a great example of an earlier strategy RPG that's aged really well. Compared to its contemporaries, it featured much simpler mechanics and overworld exploration. I think these two factors were pretty huge in allowing this one to age so gracefully. I don't mean simple in a bad way either, as a common criticism with earlier strategy RPGs was just how convoluted some of them could be. Shining Force 2 on the other hand, streamlines a lot of things, even more so than its predecessor. The huge cast of dynamic, playable characters, along with the colorful fantasy world, does a lot to immerse you in as well. I played this game as recently as last year, and was honestly pretty surprised at just how well it's held up and how much fun I had. If you want to hear some more of my detailed thoughts on it, we did release a full retrospective over the game last year, so check that one out if you're interested. And that about wraps up this video. Thanks for watching everyone, we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, it would mean a lot if you could either hit that like button, or even subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. What are some other JRPGs that you guys feel have aged pretty well that I didn't mention here? Let us know in the comments below. I'm sure there's a lot of other games that could probably apply here, so who knows? Maybe we'll do a part 2 eventually. As always, want to give a huge thanks to our Patreon supporters. Your generosity is very much appreciated. Other than that, thanks again for watching everyone, and hope you have an awesome day. This is Gaming Productions. Until next time.